Hello. The Permanent Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations welcomes you all to this discussion, where we, alongside our distinguished panelists and special guests, consider the voices of youth on the topic of sustainable development and COP27. In his encyclical, Laudato Si', His Holiness Pope Francis references the powerful words of the Patriarch Bartholomew of the Orthodox Church. In the following extract, and I quote, "For human beings to destroy the biological diversity of God's creation, for human beings to degrade the integrity of the earth by causing changes to its climate, by stripping the earth of its natural forests or destroying its wetlands, for human beings to contaminate the earth's waters, its land, its air, and its life, these are sins. Because to commit a crime against the natural world is a sin against ourselves and a sin against God." Unquote. Since the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda were unanimously adopted and agreed on by all member states of the United Nations in 2015, the past 7 years have recorded the warmest weather ever. As the Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said earlier in September, floods, droughts, heat waves, extreme storms, and wildfires are going from bad to worse, breaking records with alarming frequency. Heat waves in Europe, colossal floods in Pakistan, prolonged and severe droughts in China, the Horn of Africa, and the United States. There is nothing natural about the new scale of these disasters. They are the price for humanity's fossil fuel addiction. Well, since hearing the words of the Secretary-General, world leaders have recently gathered in Egypt to discuss the aforementioned dangers that humanity already faces and will continue to suffer. COP27. And they are doing so in tandem with a new vision. What vision is that, you may ask? Well, COP27 has embraced the first ever youth-led climate forum. And we should all seek comfort in the fact that one of the key areas of focus for the COP27 presidency is in ensuring that the voices of young and future generations are heard. As the religious leaders of the world have warned us time and time again, our very future is at stake, and the inheritors of our mistakes are the young people that we have brought into this world. Our mission at the Order of Malta, as both a religious order and as a sovereign entity, is to care for our lords, the sick, the poor, and the dispossessed. Climate change is only going to increase the problems, and the issues that we will be called upon to help alleviate and the burden of relief and compassion will be on, ultimately, the youth of today and tomorrow. So we have brought together a group of young people representing a range of countries, cultures, perspectives, and aspirations to help us recover from the mistakes caused by previous generations. Their ideas and their thoughts of these guests and panelists all share one undoubtable common interest: the protection of our planet. They know, as all of us should know, that humankind cannot adapt to extinction. I hope that you listen carefully and enjoy our discussion. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. في البداية أود أن أشكر منظمة فرسان مالطا على تنظيم هذا الحدث المهم، وكل القائمين بالطبع على تنظيم هذه المنصة لإدراكهم أهمية إشراك الشباب قادة المستقبل في مؤتمر قمة التغير المناخي COP27. في غضون 3 أشهر تقريبا سوف ينعقد هذا المؤتمر في مصر في شرم الشيخ، وجمهورية مصر العربية مليئة بالشباب، ثلث السكان تقريبا من الشباب أو أكثر من الثلث. الحقيقة أنه في جمهورية مصر العربية الدولة بالكامل قيادة ومسؤولين يعملون بجدية شديدة لوضع سياسات ملموسة لمواجهة أزمة التغير المناخي. الشباب في مصر وحول العالم بالطبع مهتمين على نحو متزايد بقضية التغير المناخي في وقت نشهد فيه زيادة في ارتفاع درجات الحرارة في أماكن مختلفة حول العالم. لقد رأينا ما حدث في الأيام الماضية، ولقد ألهمتني الالتزامات والتعهدات الشخصية التي شاهدتها من الشباب من حول العالم تجاه تعزيز الوعي البيئي ومناصرة كل الجهود التي تعمل في حماية البيئة في الكثير من لقاءاتي، وخاصة الأخيرة في العديد من الدول سواء في آسيا أو إفريقيا أو في أوروبا أو في أمريكا. الحقيقة بالتوازي مع زيادة وعي الشباب بالمناخ أصبح الشباب في جميع أنحاء العالم الآن أيضا على دراسة بقضية وأهمية الأخوة الإنسانية، هذا المشروع الإنساني العظيم المشترك الذي قدمه للبشرية البابا فرانسيس مع أخيه الإمام الطيب شيخ الأزهر الشريف في أبو ظبي في 2019 في 4 فبراير. إذا نظرنا إلى ما يحيط بعالمنا سوف نجد أنه أحيانا يتم تجاهل أصوات الشباب والأصوات الدينية في القضايا والمؤتمرات التي تعني بالتصدي لأزمة تغير المناخ، وبالطبع إعطاء الأولوية للأصوات السياسية وأصوات العلماء. ولكن أعتقد أنه آن الأوان أن ندرك أهمية الدور الذي يقوم به كلا الجانبين في مختلف الأجيال والخلفيات في هذا النضال طويل الأمد حتى تتحقق العدالة البيئية والمناخية. الآن يبلغ تعداد الشباب من بين إجمالي سكان العالم أكثر من 1.2 مليار نسمة، بينما تصل نسبة المنتسبين للأديان تقريبا 85% من سكان هذا العالم. ومن ثم فلكي تنجح في التصدي لأي أزمة وتحديدا أزمة تغير المناخ ينبغي أن يكون هناك إشراك حقيقي للأصوات الدينية وأيضا للشباب. هناك مسؤولية كبيرة بالطبع تقع على عاتق الرموز الدينية وعلى المؤسسات الدينية في إطلاق المحادثات المعنية بقضية المناخ، في التعريف بها، الإسهام في تعزيزها، واستمرار هذا الدور المهم لهذه المؤسسات في إلهام الشعوب وتبصيرهم بهذه القضية وخطورتها على المستقبل وكيف يتعاملون معها. وعليهم أن يؤكدوا كما حدث وأكد الإمام الأكبر شيخ الأزهر الشريف رئيس مجلس حكماء المسلمين وكذلك قداسة البابا فرانسيس حينما أكدوا في لقائهم في أكتوبر الماضي في الفاتيكان في قمة نداء الأديان من أجل التغير المناخي على أن حماية الأرض هي مسؤولية الإنسان، مسؤولية الإنسانية كلها، والله سبحانه وتعالى قد أوكلها إليهم وجعلهم مستخلفين في الأرض. علينا أن نشجع الشباب في مواصلة تسخير أصواتهم وجهودهم لإنقاذ عالمنا. علينا كذلك تعزيز تكوين الشراكات بين الشباب وبين صناع القرار والسياسات حول العالم. كلنا أمل أن يغرس مؤتمر الأطراف 27 لاتفاقية الأمم المتحدة لتغير المناخ بذور لإشراك الأصوات الشابة على مستوى العالم في معالجة هذه القضية، في الخطوات التي تقوم بها الدول في التعريف بهذه القضية. في مصر ينعقد هذا العام مؤتمر التغير المناخي، العام القادم سوف ينعقد في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. أعتقد أن هذه فرصة مهمة جدا وتاريخية لتعزيز دور المنطقة العربية في معالجة تحديات العصر. لم يعد بالإمكان غض الطرف عن ممارسات الأضرار البيئية التي يواجهها العالم اليوم، وآن الأوان أن نتحد جميعا لإنقاذ كوكبنا من هذا الخطر المحدق. مهما كانت الاختلافات الجغرافية أو الدينية أو السياسية أو العمرية، فالجميع يتضرر من هذه القضية الخطيرة. كلنا أمل في هذه المؤتمرات أن تؤتي ثمارها وأن تخرج بخطط ناجحة إن شاء الله لصناعة مستقبل آمن لمجتمعاتنا ولأجيالنا المقبلة. شكرا جزيلا لكم على تنظيم هذا الحدث، وسعدت كثيرا بالمشاركة معكم اليوم، ومرة أخرى أشكر منظمة فرسان مالطا على الدعوة وعلى تنظيم هذا الحدث المهم. شكرا جزيلا، في أمان الله.
Dear friends, greetings of peace, prosperity, and a bright, sustainable future. I'm delighted to be addressing you today, albeit virtually, as the first public activity organized by and with the Faith for Earth Youth Council launched a couple of months ago. It is our pleasure that the Permanent Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations and UNEP Faith for Earth are coming together to address the voices of youth on sustainable development and in preparation for the Climate Change Convention of the parties COP27 to be held in Egypt this November. Dear friends, you are seeing, reading, or even living in or around countries and areas witnessing the highest ever recorded temperatures, with rivers drying in Europe, forest fires waging across the globe, and food security threatening millions of people. July 2022 global surface temperature was the sixth highest July in the 140-year record of 0.9 degrees above the 20th century average. The significance of this is that the 5 warmest Julys on record have all occurred since 2016. In the last 3 months, monsoon rains caused flooding in Bangladesh and brutal heat waves in South Asia and Europe, and the prolonged droughts has left millions on the brink of famine in East Africa. This is a bleak picture that I am presenting here, but it represents the future we are facing. If we are, and I am sure we will, continue this trend based on scientific evidence that our anthropocenic activities are causing this all. Dear friends, while many nations are taking action to address climate change, but this is not enough. We are falling short of serious commitments and we are running out of time. We have heard too many pledges and promises. We need to move into serious and bold actions that can make a difference. Pledges made by most countries are based on calculated economic wins and losses scenarios and a completely mistaken priority. What is mainly missing from these calculations is our moral imperative responsibility towards not only humans, but also on the very life supporting systems we have or we live as part of and the other communities of creations we share this planet with. Our moral responsibility should be derived from our value and ethical systems, those that existed for centuries through our religions and belief practices, or through developing the scientific evidence that our behavior is driving us and everything around us to extinction. We need a behavioral revolution and socio-environmental contract to live in harmony and peace with nature. Dear friends, we are hopeful that young people around the world increasingly demand action on climate crisis. Youth has demonstrated that working together will shift the global mindset to focus on implementing and delivering an immediate response to the climate emergency. The Faith for Earth Youth Council is not yet another youth movement. It is a movement that is unique in its approach, bringing the moral, spiritual, religious, and ethical value system to support other efforts and mobilize billions of people driven by their eternal agenda and commitment to their Creator. This uniqueness in approach should be made loud and clear in preparations for and during COP27 on climate change, COP15 on biodiversity, and all other global intergovernmental meetings. We are also hopeful that the interfaith community came together and issued highly important interfaith statements during COP26, UN Environment Assembly, and Stockholm Plus 50. In addition to these statements, we need real implementation plans by everyone, including by faith-based organizations and systems, as practice should accompany preach. Through you, the young people driven by your faith values, we are hoping that we will change the rules of the game and change those in the decision-making seats with their moral responsibility and obligations towards people and the planet today and in the future. I thank you for coming together and wish you very successful deliberations and results of this important meeting. May your actions be blessed. Thank you.
Greetings of peace, or as we say in my part of the world, Assalamu alaikum. It's a great privilege and an honor, and obviously a joy, to be able to just share a few thoughts with you. I want to give a special thanks to our distinguished and His Excellency, the Ambassador, Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations, for creating this space for this very, very critical and important consultation, reflection, and specifically entitled Youth Voices on Sustainable Development. And the subtext here is extremely important: a case for stronger faith-based youth engagement to address climate change. COP26 was, for lack of a better word, humbling. It was a disappointment, a bitter disappointment for so many who have dedicated their lives to trying to save this environment, without which none of us can exist. None of us can exist. What's the good news? The good news is, quite frankly, that all of us who serve in offices of leadership, traditional offices of leadership around the world, need the youth. To what extent can we look to not just faith-based and faith-inspired youth, but to the whole of youth around the world? Yes, youth are extraordinarily diverse. Of course they are, just like the rest of us. What we're looking for here is not angels who can do things better, but perhaps we're looking for an aspirations to do things different. When I look at the Religions for Peace global worldwide youth movement, I am continuously humbled and inspired. These are young people from so many parts of the world, representing almost every faith tradition known to humankind, struggling to work together. And they are plagued by the same challenges that the rest of our world is plagued with. The challenge of being able to be understood amongst one another, to be willing not to be territorial, whether about their own organization or their own religion or their own community or their own institution, but to be non-territorial for the sake of the one territory that encompasses us all. Thank you.
Welcome to this interactive dialogue focused on hearing voices of youth on sustainable development and the upcoming COP27 in Egypt. This panel is hosted by the Permanent Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations, together with the UNEP Faith for Earth initiative. My name is Sofia Pietzuk, and I am the Director of Advocacy at World Youth Alliance. We're a youth organization that looks to uplift the dignity of the human person through education, culture, and also advocacy. As the official youth delegate for my organization, I am very pleased to be moderating this panel alongside fellow youth delegates and advocates. In person, we have Daniel del Valle Blanco, who is the Attaché for Political and Youth Affairs for the Permanent Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the UN. We also have Barbara Kortsova, Youth Advisor of the Permanent Mission of the Slovak Republic to the United Nations. We also have Xiaoyu Dai, who is the Education Program Consultant at UNESCO. Online, we have Felix Osman Cole, who is a youth counselor at UNEP Faith for Earth, and we also have Anna Kvashuk, who is the youth counselor for UN Habitat and UNEP Faith for Earth Youth. So to begin, a couple words about COP27. It's seeking to evaluate how countries are faring in their commitments to the Paris Agreement. Some of these main agreements consisted in keeping the rise in global average temperature well below 2 degrees Celsius and ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius. Also strengthening the ability to adapt to climate change and build resilience. And then finally, aligning financial flows with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. However, before we start talking about COP, why don't we talk about climate change in general? So I'm going to turn to Barbara. Barbara, why don't you introduce yourself and tell me what initial steps you believe must be taken to address climate change and which steps are the most urgent?
Thank you very much, Sophia, for your question. First of all, I would like to thank the Sovereign Order of Malta for organizing this event. My name is Barbara. As you said, I'm the youth advisor of the Slovak mission to the United Nations. And I'm also a recent law graduate, so I focus on law, international law, as well as climate change. To your question, I believe that, and we will all agree, that climate change and climate action needs to happen now. We cannot wait for tomorrow, we cannot wait for 2050. It's not a problem of the future, it's a problem of today. As an example, just recent extreme floods in Pakistan, where like 1/3 of the country is underwater, is something that is maybe very rare at the moment in that scale, but will be more and more common if we don't act now. In my opinion, it is critical for the international community to step up their game, to further efforts in implementing policies relating to climate change and climate action, and drastically accelerate the transition to green and sustainable economies and move away from fossil fuels. And unless this is done rapidly, we will likely be out of reach to achieve the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius.
I think these are all really, really good points, and I would actually also like to hear from one of our online panelists. So now I'll turn to Anna. Anna, which steps do you think are most urgent for addressing climate change right now?
That's a good question, though I believe there is no universal answer to it. If each of us should be appropriate at the place where we are, meaning each of us should fulfill different urgent steps. So, for example, educating people is as much important as taking certain actions. So I would say urgently each of us need to think of benefits that we can bring to our community, city or country and start fulfilling them.
Great points, Anna. Thank you very much for your contribution. Now I'm going to turn to my next question. To start, one source I was looking at said that as of now, only 18 countries have submitted new or revised NDCs, which stand for Nationally Determined Contributions. In other words, these are commitments for how nations will reduce their emissions each year. So already, if only 18 countries have submitted their NDCs, and the conference is in November, are we already seeing that there are shortcomings to COP27? I think there are some. So I think I'll turn to Daniel. Maybe you could briefly introduce yourself and also talk about what other shortcomings you might see.
Thank you very much, Sophia. And indeed, I'm very pleased to be here among all these young activists, but young representatives, and to be able to speak about this very, very important topic. As you said, my name is Daniel, and I'm Attaché for Political and Youth Affairs with the Permanent Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the UN. And yes, I think it's too early to predict that, I'm afraid. I'm always an eternal optimist, as every diplomat should be, but I hope that COP27 will be, of course, successful, because the UN and the Egyptian organizers has been investing a lot of effort into that. But judging from previous experiences, I believe we need to concentrate our utmost attention on two different things. The first one, I would say, it's achieving a balanced compromise that could be acceptable for as many delegations as possible. You can never build a feasible solution or deal on not being inclusive enough or not sufficiently addressing the demands and concerns of as many nations as possible, developed or developing ones, or from the north or the south. As it is often said in diplomatic negotiations, at the end of the day, the task narrows down to how to make everybody equally unhappy, because there is really no way how to make everybody happy, right? And the second response I would give, it's also keeping both tracks, mitigation and adaptation, and all key stakeholders, including for sure the youth, as real part of any solutions designed.
Thank you for that well thought out answer. I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say, Barbara, about this. What do you think will be the shortcomings to COP27?
So I'm also an optimist, the same as Daniel, but I would say that current geopolitical situation might hamper collaboration of COP27. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, tensions between the US and China over Taiwan. And for example, the group G20, the group of the world's major economies, who are basically responsible for around 80% of global emissions, their meetings are very important for climate action, and they have been at previous COPs as well. But Russia's invasion has destabilized the group. And some members think that they don't have a place at the table at the moment unless they stop violating international law. So this might hamper collaboration a little bit. Furthermore, I think inflation, uneven recovery from COVID-19, high food prices, global conflicts, they might make expectations for significant developments lower. And also countries, as you said in the beginning, they have been slipping on climate action, and they are not doing enough in the lead up to COP27. But I'm still optimistic. I believe we should be, and even in this fragile situation, we should remain hopeful and trust that we will be able to still collaborate, and that the urgency of global climate action will prevail, and COP27 will be successful.
Mm-hmm. I think those are really great points, and especially bringing up things that we hadn't thought of, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the different other conflicts going on around the world, and obviously we can never predict a climate disaster, so when those things happen, the goals kind of get destabilized. So maybe talking about goals, I have a question for our online panelists at this moment, so I'll ask this one directly to them. Felix and Anna, how can we achieve climate goals in a results-oriented way? What is the role of faith-based organizations in this regard? I would love to hear both of your thoughts on this.
Greetings to everyone. I'm very much happy to participate on this conference on the Voices of Youth on Sustainable Development and COP27, a strong case for faith-based youth involvement in addressing climate change. Climate emergency demands action from all of us. We need to get net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050, and everyone has a role to play, more especially young people. And nations cannot be transformed without the transformation of its young people. Young people and the global citizens need to take urgent actions in addressing climate change. And the climate solutions actions that need to be taken is the fact that we must transform our transportation by choosing public transport, preferably electric options. Leave your car at home and walk or cycle. We must spread the word. Climate mitigations, actions and adaptations, environmental protections, educations, to encourage and educate our friends, families and co-workers to reduce their carbon pollution. Thank you very much.
I have to admit there is a big disconnection regarding climate change issues among different generations. Well, I don't believe that there is a guilty party in such a situation. We as a young generation possess different tools to tackle climate change issues which weren't available to our ancestors. Thus, I believe it's highly important to give young people a place at the table when making decisions that will affect future generations. Key tool to resolve climate change emergencies is to communicate and share ideas at all levels with older generations. Also, I believe such steps will make climate change accessible to everyone. Without inclusivity, we won't be able to achieve climate targets. I believe young generation is heard, but only together, by making collective steps, we can tackle climate change.
Thank you so much. Now turning to our in-person panelists, I would also like to ask for Daniel's thoughts on this question of what faith-based organizations can do to achieve climate goals in a results-oriented way.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Well, to answer your question, it remains rather simple and can perhaps rather naively, due to multifaceted nature of climate change, be broken down into two broad approaches. First, we need to honestly want to and commit to the slowing down and ultimate prevention of climate change. And secondly, we need to join forces across every single aspect of our global community and pull together our finances, knowledge, commitment, and thus each and every one of our resources together, with these, of course, including faith-based organizations. To quote Pope Francis at the launch of Laudato Si, we can all collaborate, each with their own culture and experience, each with their own initiatives and abilities, so that our Mother Earth returns to its original beauty and creation again shines according to God's plan. So, as mentioned earlier, climate change is a very multifaceted issue that cannot be solved overnight. That said, we can certainly start by working together and enhancing every asset that our global community has in their arsenal, including, as I mentioned earlier, also faith-based organization. So in short, there is absolutely nothing to lose by utilizing every beneficial utility that our world has to offer in our biggest fight yet.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Felix. Thank you, Anna, for these comments. So for my next question, I would like to talk about the fact that climate change is often seen as a youth issue, despite the fact that climate and its impacts really affect the lives of everyone. Considering this, how can we encourage greater intergenerational solidarity in our efforts to slow down and to prevent climate change? I'd like to first turn to Barbara to answer this question.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Just to say that the theme of this year's International Youth Day was intergenerational solidarity and therefore creating a world for all ages and leave no one behind. It had the objective to highlight that in order to achieve all the SDGs, we need to work together, generation with generation. And intergenerational solidarity is crucial for SDG 13 because none of the generations can combat climate change alone. Intergenerational solidarity, for me, it is really about collaborating. So we need to learn how to collaborate together. Everyone has to be given opportunity to collaborate and contribute because we all share power and we all share the same fundamental human rights. And therefore, I believe that we need to foster intergenerational dialogue between generations. And create an environment that is safe and that encourages collaboration, support, and teamwork between generations. Because it is true that older generations have more experience they can share with the younger generation. But the younger generations, they have ambition to drive and actually to tackle climate change and its impacts. So they have the energy to do something. So we should all join forces and age should not divide us in doing so. So I believe reverse mentoring could be an option as well. So not only older generations mentoring younger ones, but also younger generations mentoring older ones to learn and to see the value what each generation can bring to the table.
I think, yeah, those are some great suggestions, great points. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Daniel, in this regard.
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah, and I think your question is totally right. You know, young people are often the real climate champions and the drivers of climate action, but partly because we are forward-looking by definition, and then we do realize that it is the key issue of our future life on our blue planet, right? But also because we are not held back by certain obligations or commitments that would hamper our active involvement and resolve. Unlike representatives of older generations, whether decision makers or business executives that are often held back by various political and also socioeconomic considerations. But I truly believe that we can bridge that gap, mainly by focusing even more than now on green economy and also green solutions. In other words, it is sustainability that should unite us and guide us for our future collective decisions. Because I always say we are in this together for good or for bad. So in this context, I would like to very much commend the three main priorities of the incoming president of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Csaba Kőrösi, with his 3S. He say solidarity, sustainability, and science. And I truly think they are very well captured. They very well capture the key focus that is needed in our collective action, also in the run-up for the COP27.
Thank you, Daniel. I would also like to turn to Anna and hear her thoughts on this question.
Though climate change is a global challenge, I believe it requires solutions both on the global and local scales. So the best way to achieve climate goals is to keep constantly informing people and encourage them to take small steps towards achieving a big goal. So, for example, at the global level, it's necessary to continue to conduct rising awareness campaigns on how to tackle climate change issues, while on the local level, each of us needs to support usage of clean energy, avoid deforestation in regions, or reduce greenhouse emissions by choosing bikes over cars, energy-saving bulbs over the ordinary ones, or simply turning off TV while not using it. Same happens with faith-based organizations. They take a strong place in respective communities, thus facilitating not only educational work, but they also provide examples on clean energy and sustainable farming. They in general aspire to strengthen our regional and national civil society networks to ensure that all global advocacy and strategies are informed from the bottom up.
Thank you very much, Anna. Now we're at our final question for the panel. As we look to address climate change, how do we keep human dignity at the center of our work? In other words, how do we work to heal our planet without devaluing human beings throughout the process? For this question, I'd like to hear from Xiaoyu, and you can also introduce yourself in your response.
Thank you, moderator. And hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Permanent Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta, together with the UNEP Face for Earth initiative to facilitate such an interactive dialogue for our youth that includes our voices to address the climate change and also promote the sustainable development. It's my great honor to speak as a youth delegate and share some of my experience based on my own experience and backgrounds. So I was also very inspiring when hear some of your insights here. Let me introduce myself briefly. First, my name is Xiaoyu Dai, and I'm currently an MPhil graduate from Department of Sociology at Cambridge University, and I'm currently working as an education program consultant at United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organizations. And the focus of my work is mainly on the topic of education for sustainable development, education in emergency, youth skills, and all kinds of issues related to the SDG 4, namely quality education. So to answer the question on how to keep human dignity at the center of our work of tackling the challenges of climate change, I would like to draw your attention to the linkage between the climate change and education. Since education is the basic human rights that help raise people out of poverty and inequalities, as well as plays an important role to promote sustainable development. However, the right to education is being threatened by climate change, directly or indirectly, especially for those people who are already vulnerable and lack of capacity to adapt, such as those who are living in poverty, rural populations, agricultural families, etc. So from the global reports on internal displacement conducted by the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, we can learn some specific and staggering data to understand the complicated impacts of climate change. For example, in 2019, as a result of disasters, 24.9 million people were internally displaced, and the figure increased to 30.7 million in 2020. The disastrous consequences of climate change are no longer rare catastrophes. It becomes worse every year. In such case, the group of people who are affected and displaced by climate change, such as flooding, drought, hurricanes, they are facing huge barriers to education, while the protection of their right to education are barely noted. Apparently, they are not. Apparently, they are way more invisible. So here is a youth calling for attention to protect the right to education for certain vulnerable and marginalized group of people, such as women, girls, and refugees. I would like to draw more attention to the policymakers and stakeholders to make joint efforts in reducing the barriers to education and ensure the fundamental education access to those climate displaced people. I believe that's also a significant part of maintaining our human dignity while we are addressing the climate change issues. What is good is that from what I have learned from UNESCO, UNICEF, and United Nations University, there are already a lot of efforts made by the governments, the UN entities, civil society, and private sectors to gather evidence of the learning loss and educational risk caused by climate change. But it finds out that the challenges are way much more complicated in different contexts, along with varying barriers to education. So it's necessary to provide context-based solutions tailored to different needs. So to discuss the solutions, I would like to stress that education is not only the victim of climate change, but also an important contributor to climate change adaptation and mitigation. By climate change education, it helps in raising people's awareness, especially for our younger generation, to understand and address the impacts of climate change through equipping us with the information, the knowledge, the skills, and also the attitudes necessary to engage, to act, and as an agent of change. So from some of my research on the non-state actors, when I work as a researcher at Cambridge University, we are happy to see that in light of the complicated context I have mentioned, there are diversified initiatives that empowers young people from the communities to lead the process of resilience building by leveraging education for sustainable development as a transformative tool. So relevant education, technical training, and also the research in schools and community through ESD are regarded as green solutions, such as developing climate-smart agriculture, building energy-saving libraries, and so on. These green solutions are necessary for building a climate-resilient society as a whole. So currently, we are all on the road to COP27. I know a lot of young people, they are currently making urgent calls for actions to ensure that every learner is prepared to combat climate change and to promote sustainable development, as enriched in SDG 4.7. Here, I still want to reiterate that more concrete laws, regulations, policies, and programs should cover the issue of the protection of the right to education for all learners, including those are influenced by climate change. And the green solutions through education for sustainable development should also be emphasized as a powerful tool to enable us to take informed actions to tackle the challenges to human security. So the holistic social transformation requires efforts from all levels, from the global and national actions to individual practices. So our young people as agents of change should keep engaging in such kind of conversation and dialogues, and also the decision-making process to learn, to advocate, to collaborate, and to make our voice heard. So by doing so, I believe that we can further harness the transformative power of climate change education. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. I think you made a great point about the importance of education and climate change, that we can't just see climate change as an issue on itself, but it also, it touches on so many issues can affect climate change. And if I even might add a little bit to answer this question, because it's my favorite question, I would say as a representative of World Youth Alliance that people are our greatest resource, the greatest resource on the planet. We're born with minds to solve problems. And so if we are cultivating those minds with education, if we're creating person-centered policies that are creating more just societies, just laws, good infrastructure, decent work conditions, all those things create thriving conditions for people to be able to sit down and think about how to solve problems. And so, and that is a resource that is never ending. Our creativity is unlimited. So thank you so much for speaking about the importance of education. And I would like to thank all of you for your presence and for your contributions today. And last but not least, I would also like to reiterate my thanks to the Permanent Observer Mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations, as well as the UNEP Faith for Earth Initiative for hosting this panel. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.